And I call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 23 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Science and Research. Today's meeting, as you know, is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of June 23, 2022. Members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. Pursuant to Standing Order 1083I and the motion adopted by the committee on Monday, September 26, 2022, we are continuing the study of international moonshot programs. I'd like to make a few comments for the benefit of witnesses and members. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those participating via video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you are not speaking. Interpretation for those on Zoom, you have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either floor, English, or French. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. For members in the room, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand. For members on Zoom, please use the raise hand function. The clerk and I will manage the speaking order as best we can, and we appreciate your patience and understanding in this regard. In accordance with our routine motion, I am informing the committee that all witnesses have completed the required connection tests in advance of the meeting. And I also see that Ms. Sonia Sidhu is joining us tonight. Welcome. I'd now like to welcome all our witnesses. We are absolutely delighted tonight to have the Right Honourable Mr. David Johnston, the Governor General of Canada. And from the Canadian Institute for Advanced Research, we have Dr. Alan Bernstein, President Emeritus. Welcome. And from the Climate Emergency Unit, we have Mr. Seth Klein, who is the team lead. To all our witnesses, we are delighted you're joining us, and I welcome you. Each witness will have 5 minutes to speak. At the 4.5-minute mark, I'll hold up a yellow card. We aim to be fair, so it's 5 minutes, and they'll let you know you have 30 seconds left to go. And with that, we will turn it over to the Right Honourable Mr. David Johnston for 5 minutes. Welcome.
Merci, Madame Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm honored to be here and to have this opportunity to address the House of Commons Standing Committee on Science and Research.
Overemphasize the importance of your subject, moonshot innovation. Innovation begins with curiosity and moves to creativity, but very simply means doing things better. Given the time limits, let me speak in bullet points. My recommendation is very simply this. Canada's moonshot is to become the Athens to the new Rome's. We will do so by practicing what I call the diplomacy of knowledge, engaging with the world through international education and research, with students and researchers coming here from abroad, and our students and researchers traveling and engaging abroad. We will be global citizens, and our research power enhanced through international collaboration. I've left with you 3 documents. First, my address to the American Association for the Advancement of Sciences in Vancouver on February 16, 2012 on the diplomacy of knowledge. The second comes from a chapter in my book, The Idea of Canada, Letters to a Nation, and this was a letter to His Highness, the Aga Khan, on the importance of pluralism and practicing the diplomacy of knowledge. And the third is Canada's International Education Strategy, 2014 to 2019, prepared for the then Minister of International Trade by a task force chaired by Dr. Amit Chakma, then President of Western University. I recommend that you review this remarkable report, update it, and craft a renewed strategy for the next decade. Of these 3 documents, in the interest of time, I will simply state 5 propositions that come from my address to the AAAS. 1, in our modern globalized world, the well-being of nations will be defined by how well they develop and advance knowledge, more than anything else. Second, the opportunity to share information has never been so ubiquitous and so cheap. Third, communication is so fast and easy, thus so to change. 4, Ideas are improved when shared and tested through action. And 5, we must promote independent practices that we have served us well, but we must also broaden what and how we learn. Now let me move to some opinions under 4 themes on benefits. 1, international students recruited to Canada, benefits. A, they pay international tuition fees and spend money while here and support high-quality jobs, quite enormously. B, they comprise Canada's 7th largest export sector. In Australia, it's their 3rd largest export sector, and we should aspire to make it Canada's largest export sector. C, they provide highly skilled labor as teaching and research assistants and are our most desirable source to become permanent residents. 100% of Canada's population growth comes from immigrants, which we need to support our aging population. And their children outpace young, already here Canadians in educational and entrepreneurial attainment. D, climate change and population dislocation pressures over the next several decades will force more emigration, that is, immigration into this country. Canada, with the world's 2nd largest landmass and 20% of the world's freshwater resources, will face significant international pressure for Canada to significantly increase its current 38 million population. Theme 2, Canadian students abroad for study, research, work, or volunteering, the benefits. 1, they become global citizens with a much broader perspective. From my observation of my 5 daughters who began international exchanges as teenagers, that experience is transformative. They become more curious, tolerant, judicious, empathetic, self-reliant, creative, and resilient. C, through broader understanding and their new entrepreneurship, they promote Canadian cultural values and Canadian business abroad. D, together with international students here, they promote the intercultural harmony we see in our domestic public education system, where young people from different cultural backgrounds are educated together, and we as a nation can project this Canadian experience onto the world stage as peaceful, collaborative pluralism. Opinion 3, trade and investment benefits. A, international students returning home and Canadians abroad become our best ambassadors and unpaid trade commissioners. B, the people-to-people contracts and friendships allow Canada to tap into a much broader talent pool. And C, they encourage all Canadians to develop broader, more inclusive views. Finally, research enhancement benefits. Research and development is built on enhanced talent pools. International education is a splendid foundation. B, from this base, collaborative partnerships are created and expanded institution by institution, collaborative alignment by alignment, and country by country across the globe. C, Canada is already a collaborative choice. We have less than 2% of the world's population, over 4% of the peer-reviewed STEM articles in the leading scientific journals, and more than half of those articles have international co-authors. This expanding base of collaborative talent helps Canada significantly in contributing to and drawing from the research strengths of the USA, which bilateral partnership is already the most beneficial in the world. Our ability to bring in other international partners helps to equalize Canada's contribution.
I hate to do this.
Bernard Shaw once wrote, some people see
Sir,
things
I'm
as they
gonna
are and say
have
why.
to be fair to
I
everyone.
dream of
Will
things
you
that ought to
forgive
be and
me?
ask why
And
not.
I've had the
Thank you.
most wonderful conversations
C'est
at
bon.
his house, so I feel terrible. To be fair to everyone, with that, I'm going to go to Dr. Bernstein for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll try to be brief, and I'll just say at the outset that I agree with what David Johnson has just said, first of all, and secondly, I commend the committee, actually, for focusing this meeting, at least, on the importance of international moonshots. And I say that in light of the ending of COP27, when climate change is very much on everyone's mind. We all know that that issue of climate change in the world will only be addressed, and now here I'm quoting Gordon Brown, the former Chancellor of the Exchequer in the UK, with science and research. Only science and research gives us that hope. And in that sense, it's very much like the pandemic that we would like to be through, but we're still in the middle of, where, again, Science and research has offered hope, and not just hope, but drugs, vaccines, and diagnostics that has really saved the world from this emerging new virus. So let me go on to a few other things. I think the pandemic has brilliantly demonstrated what science, working across political disciplinary boundaries, fueled by global collaboration and the prior decades of fundamental science, can do in a remarkably short period of time. These RNA vaccines have been game changers, unexpected game changers, and have certainly saved hundreds of millions of lives around the world, including probably about 1 million here in Canada. Climate change will also only be addressed by decades of prior science, powered by global collaboration. And here I want to stress the word moonshot. Climate change will not be addressed by incremental science. Climate change, like COVID, will only be addressed by moonshot science. And that's why I think your choice of that word to every member of the committee is commendable, because I think it's appropriate. I want to now address the question, can Canada contribute to moonshot science? I think this is an important question that this committee and all of us need to deal with. To that, my reply is very clear. There have been 2 recent moonshots that have changed the world: artificial intelligence and RNA vaccines. And I think nobody would argue with those 2, actually. Well, artificial intelligence, and deep learning and reinforcement learning were developed right here in Canada by Jeff Hinton in Toronto with his students, and by Rich Sutton and his trainees in Edmonton and his students. And the result of that has really transformed industry of every kind of science, and has unleashed worldwide trillions of dollars worth of investment from around the world. That has been a true game changer. Now, how did that happen? I think it happened, and I know it happened because both Jeff and Rich were working in the States. And to your point, Madam Chair, we're thinking about leaving the United States for Canada because of our values, our state of our democracy, the state of our cities. And so they moved here, actually facilitated by CFAR, the organization that I had the honor to lead for the last 10 years, to move to Toronto and Edmonton, respectively. The result of that, and to go back to a point that David Johnson has made, is Toronto and Edmonton, and Montreal, because Joshua Benjo was one of the trainees that Jeff trained, are now booming as a result of the artificial intelligence boom that was created by the fundamental science that was funded by the federal government through CFAR and then through NSERC back in the early 2000s. So I think there's an important lesson there in terms of what we're capable of and the role of government in catalyzing that moonshot. The second one is RNA vaccines. And perhaps this is something that committee members are not aware of. Let me go through 4 really pivotal contributions that Canadians have made to these vaccines. The Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, which has been administered to more individuals on the planet than any other COVID vaccine, and the Johnson & Johnson Harvard vaccine used an adenovirus vector technology. That technology was developed by Frank Graham when he was a professor at McMaster University. Moderna, the founder of the brilliant company that founded RNA vaccines, was founded by Derek Rossi, also a Canadian, and actually a former graduate student of mine, I'm very proud to say. Lipid nanoparticles, which are essential for protecting the RNA of an RNA vaccine, was developed by Peter Cullis at UBC. And every RNA vaccine that's administered on the planet now uses Peter Cullis's patented technology that he developed in Vancouver. And finally, how the immune system works and the role of the sentinel cells that are presented by the RNA vaccines, the so-called dendritic cells, were first identified by the late Ralph Steinman, who won his Nobel Prize for that work, working at Rockefeller University.
Dr.
So
Bernstein,
Canadians are capable of doing it. I will now stop.
It's the worst part of this job to have to stop hearing, but there's great questions they want to ask you. Thank you so much for your testimony. We're so glad to have you all here. And we're now go to Mr. Klein for 5 minutes, please. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair Duncan, for this invitation. I'm joining you from the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations, otherwise known as Vancouver. It's an honor to be in such distinguished company today. And in truth, I'm not entirely certain why you invited me. I am not a scientist or an engineer, although I am indeed interested in the speedy mass deployment of research and technology. I'm a public policy researcher and writer. I was for 22 years the founding BC director of the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives. And more recently, I'm the author of a 2020 book I believe some of you are familiar with, entitled A Good War, Mobilizing Canada for the Climate Emergency. And I believe it's the ideas in that book which have prompted this invitation. Because when it comes to the climate crisis, to borrow an apt phrase, Houston, we have a problem. I am not the first person to equate the urgent need for dramatic action on the climate emergency with the moonshot. David Suzuki has frequently done so. And just last week, a Guardian editorial directed to world leaders gathered at the COP meetings in Egypt, which ran in 30 media organizations across 20 countries, stated the following: time is running out. Rather than getting out of fossil fuels and into clean energy, many wealthy nations are reinvesting in oil and gas. Climate chaos becomes irreversible. And then they wrote this: solving the crisis is the moonshot of our times. Getting to the moon succeeded within a decade because huge resources were devoted to it. A similar commitment is needed now. Let me speak specifically to the Canadian context. As a country, for the last 20 years, despite all of our climate pledges and commitments, the best we have managed to do is plateau our emissions at an historic high. We have failed to actually bend the curve. The last year for which we have GHG data is 2020, and we did see a notable decline that year, but recall that this was the year of lockdown, with so much travel and economic activity suspended. So most analysts predict we will see an increase again in 2021 when data comes available. The federal government is now taking climate action, but that action is nowhere close to the speed and scale the crisis demands. I think we will, in coming years, see a slow bending of the curve of our carbon pollution, but not nearly at the pitch and pace the science demands. The federal government's climate policies will be modestly successful, but not moonshot successful. And there's no comfort in that. As the great climate writer Bill McKibben has said, to win slowly on climate is to lose. So why have we seen so little progress on this task? Among the key reasons, I contend, is that if you survey our federal and provincial climate policies to date, what they almost all have in common is that they are voluntary. We remain stuck trying to incentivize our way to victory. We encourage change, we offer price signals and rebates and tax cuts and credits, but we do not require change, and we are not driving change through direct government investments. The government's flagship climate policy remains the escalating carbon price, which it hopes will cajole private investment in the right direction. And to be clear, I support carbon pricing. But as a focal point, it is a strategy that will see us condemn our children and grandchildren to lives of profound disruption and catastrophe. This is no way to prosecute a battle for our lives. My book seeks to excavate an historic story from another time we faced a civilizational threat, the transformation of Canadian society and the whole-scale retooling of our economy in order to prosecute the Second World War. And I want to share quickly some lessons from that precursor moonshot with you. When I'm giving talks and interviews, I'm invariably asked, how do you know when a government gets the emergency? And reflecting on our wartime experience and now also our pandemic experience, I've distilled my answer to that, to what I call the 6 markers of emergency. These are the markers that indicate when you know that a government has shifted into genuine emergency mode. And they are: first, it spends what it takes to win. Second, it creates new economic institutions to get the job done. Third, it shifts from voluntary and incentive-based policies to mandatory measures. Fourth, it tells the truth about the severity of the crisis and communicates a sense of urgency about the measures necessary to combat it. Fifth, it commits to leave no one behind. And sixth, it centers Indigenous leadership rights and title, as this too in our context is vital to success. During the Second World War, the Canadian government hit the first 5 markers big time. And likewise, during the first year of the pandemic emergency response, I would say our government, for the most part, passed the first 4 markers. But with respect to the climate emergency, so far at least, our governments are failing on all 6 counts. I welcome any questions. I'm happy to elaborate on any of these emergency markers.
Thank you, Mr. Klein.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And again, thank you to our witnesses. We're delighted to have you. We're now going to go to our questions. You have a committed, eager committee. And tonight we begin the 6-minute round with Mr. Mazier. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Johnson, I read your remarks you gave in Vancouver, and you mentioned the ability to develop and advance knowledge. It will be the new currency and the new passport to success. You went on to discuss how easy it is to share information in today's world and through the internet. And I quote, "This sharing is made possible by the communications revolution brought about by the rise of the internet." Can you expand on the importance of the internet and cellular connectivity in advancing knowledge?
Well, thank you for that question. First, it's a dramatic change in how we communicate. What brought the Western Europe out of the Dark Ages into the Industrial Revolution, 15th, 16th century, was the development of the printing press. Other nations had it. China had it. Islam had it.
Tu veux le blanc, là? Ben là, je suis en meeting. Pas là.
Monsieur Lauzon, thank you. Sorry, we'll go back.
Continuing.
Yeah.
And that printing press transformed Western Europe into democracies, into people who learned by reading and studying and so on. But it took 3 centuries for it to reach a majority of the popular Western Europe. The internet, which does all of that and more, reached the majority of the world's population in less than a decade. So it's a dramatic change in how we communicate. And it really is a wonderful period in history because we have so much opportunity to share knowledge so widely. I guess the other thing I would say is that in what I'm recommending today has to do with the culture of innovation. It's a cultural thing. I remember John Evans, that wonderful university and other leader, saying to me one time as 2 fellows that enjoy hockey, "David, do you think we could ever get Canadians as interested in research as they are in hockey?" And I said, "Well, John, that's probably a bridge too far, but it's worth trying." But I think that's what I'm driving at by education as the foundation for moonshots, and education on an international scale. And Canada having the moonshot to be the best in the business in that kind of thing, and using the new digital revolution to permit us to lead as certain countries in Western Europe led with the printing press.
Excellent. Well, as you know, this, and we're talking about all of Canada kind of approach as well, but unfortunately, as you know, many rural and remote Canadians have no access to internet to speak of. In fact, a report by the Canadian Internet Registration Authority found that urban internet speeds are 380% faster than rural speeds. Not to mention that the price that we pay is exorbitant for Canadians pay for internet and cellular services as well. This prevents many rural Canadians from participating in economic growth opportunities that you have mentioned. I think actually a good moonshot program for Canada would be to connect all Canadians with reliable internet services. What do you think?
Well, I had the wonderful privilege of looking at that over 20 years ago when I chaired the Information Highway Advisory Council with 2 reports, one in 1993-94 and the other 94-95. John Manley was the minister, Kevin Lynch was then Deputy Minister of Industry, and Mike Binder was the Associate Deputy Minister for Spectrum. And it's the best public task force thing I've ever done. And we established the goal of Canada being the leader in the world in using digital communication. And extending it for equality of opportunity to all corners of the country was a very fundamental objective. Because Canada is a country that stands for equality of opportunity, especially with respect to educational opportunities, and that is that. A report was filed, a number of recommendations followed. That one came along, but it's come along far too slowly. And I think if Canada is to fulfill my great belief that we can have equality of opportunity and excellence too, we really must make those communication devices available to all corners of the country.
Thank you.
And when we don't, we miss a great opportunity.
Okay. And So as you know, the U.S. is really being very aggressive with their moonshot program. And what are your thoughts on how do we compete as a Canada, being their neighbor, for a moonshot program? And what should we do as government to move forward and act competitively?
Well, I think the first thing we do is recognize what an important resource it is to be living side by each with the United States. I mean, so many of us have had our education in the United States, and so many of us have had the opportunity to work on joint research projects with them, and so many of our institutions have benefited from Americans who've come north, as two of the individuals that Alan cited just a moment ago. So that's a great privilege. But I would say that we continue to establish those research partnerships with the great American projects, moonshots or not, as we develop our own. And we will have our own moonshots. You know, Alan gave us a illustration of what's happened with respect to the development of vaccines. Canada played a big part in that kind of moonshot. But my suggestion is a broader moonshot, and it has to do with bringing innovation into the minds of all Canadians, beginning with very young people. And for me, the single easiest thing to do that is relatively inexpensive. It's bringing international students here, and it's sending our young people abroad, and building from that a pool of talent on which excellent research comes along, and we develop a series of moonshots.
How am I doing? Oh, Mr. Bernstein, is your organization doing any researching on new technologies that have the potential to connect rural and remote Canadians with quality internet and cellular services?
Jess,
excellent
since
question.
The end?
And I,
oh, sorry, Dr. Bernstein. Mr. Mazur, perhaps you'd like to ask Dr. Bernstein if he'd be willing to table that.
If you could table that, or a short answer. Please table that.
I think
if
you've
you
run
have
out.
a response to that, that'd be great.
Thank you.
Dr.
And now we will go to Mr. Collins for 6 minutes, please.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and through you to Dr. Bernstein. But Dr. Bernstein, I was so pleased that you mentioned McMaster University and their involvement and their contributions to the creation of the vaccine. I recently toured McMaster, their new mobility solutions area, and looked at their AI studies that they have ongoing, their autonomous vehicle programs that they're looking at, and it struck me during my tour that it didn't seem like the federal government was playing a role as it relates to funding. It was private sector investments, the university had its own money, and of course I think there was even money from the U.S. government. So I guess my question to you would be, what roles do you see the universities playing as it relates to moonshot programs? And as a supplemental question to that, what role does the federal government play in terms of supporting those programs when the university picks up the torch?
well, first of all, I think that's a really excellent question, Mr. Collins. If you look at the history of innovation of all kinds, and certainly in more recent times, in terms of the pandemic, in terms of other advances, a vast majority of them started from fundamental research carried on by our universities and funded by federal governments. And I would just point out that the recent CHIPS and Science Act that was passed in the United States has a huge amount of money. I don't remember the exact amount right now, a huge amount of money for fundamental research in the United States. And the reason for that is exactly what we're talking about, a strong belief that the engine of innovation starts with university research, with fundamental research, and starts with training those young people who are going to have that entrepreneurial spirit that Mr. Johnson has been talking about, that culture of innovation, who are trained. So, for example, I'll give you a real life example. A young woman, Raquel Erdison, trained with Jeff Hinton on artificial intelligence. She now has a company in Toronto that employs about 50 PhDs in artificial intelligence who are developing self-driving, autonomous, semi-autonomous vehicles, starting with trucks. There's been a number of articles in the Report on Business in the Globe and Mail on her company. That research all started, and that company all started from fundamental research started at the University of Toronto, which has now moved into the marketplace. And she's raised, as a result, of close to $100 million from the private sector to start her company, which is called Wabi. So it's an example, and I take your point about McMaster. There's a huge amount of fabulous research going on at McMaster, which is leading to exactly the kinds of innovation that we're talking about this evening. And it's not that I'm driving for fundamental research at universities per se, but the history lesson, if I can put it that way, is that only governments can fund fundamental research. The timelines and the risks are too high. And that's why the US CHIPS and Science Act explicitly recognizes that. And what President Biden is saying is, I will invest in that fundamental research, but I also expect industry to then pick up what comes out of those universities and take it to the next stage. And that's something the U.S. does well. It's something that we still have a lot to learn from our colleagues and friends south of the border in terms of how to do that better, including the great research that's going on in McMaster that you referenced. And I could give other examples of research at McMaster that I think is really fabulous.
Thanks, Dr. Bernstein, for that answer. Madam Chair, I think I have about 2 minutes left. I'm going to cede the rest of my time to my friend and colleague, MP Sidhu.
Thank you, Chad. Madam Chair, I just want to ask a question to Right Honourable David Johnson, Dr. Johnson. I'm from Brampton. Brampton's the home of many innovative and world-renowned companies. We have a MDA with the help of the federal government. MDA Space in Brampton is developing leading-edge technologies of the iconic Canadian Arm tree. Can you expand on how strategic investment in Canada's space sector are advancing ambitious research and innovative, and what are the impact can be? You also talked about the Global Citizen Program. What role does diversity and inclusion play in generating bold and ambitious research?
Well, let me focus on the Canada Space Agency specifically. I'd say several things. One is what impresses me is the international collaboration that has come from Canada's participation, but in a number of nations, including some who are not necessarily the most friendly nations with respect to great projects. But I think that's really a great triumph of coming together in a scientific endeavor. When I was at McGill, I had the privilege of the Institute for Air and Space Law, which was created at McGill because it was a center for international air traffic regulation and association. Taking advantage of the talent was there, but developing the new laws that would govern outer space, including where you put space stations, that too was a very important international collaboration. And I'm very encouraged by the fact that Canada has been able, in a number of areas of space exploration and development, to really punch above its weight by assessing the talent we have and by being prepared to work in a very collaborative fashion. And for me, that's the big answer, the big response to come from the space agency and what we do. Not huge amounts of money by comparison with some of the other nations, but it's been very thoughtfully directed, I think, to make an out of proportion contribution.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Thank you, Ms. Sidhu. And really, thank you to the witnesses. This is so interesting. And now we will go to Monsieur Blanchet-Chanca for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I would like to greet our guests. My first question is for Mr. Johnson. It's a pleasure to welcome you here. In your statement, you talked about a strategy to stimulate investment for both foreign students to come to Canada and Canadian students to go abroad. Now, what current portrait do you have? I base myself on the fact that Canada is the only country in the G7 that's reduced its investments in R&D between 2000 and 2020, and the only country in the G7 that has lost researchers in recent years. Similarly, the students have not seen their graduate bursaries improved, masters and PhDs. So how can you pedal forward when you don't even have a bike? Madam Chair, I do believe that we have to be making major efforts to encourage student exchanges with other countries. Canada is in a special position. Surveys have assessed cities around the world and have ranked Montreal as the #1 city around the world for being a student. That's great, but it's not just Montreal. It's elsewhere in Quebec and elsewhere in Canada. We have a very welcoming climate, and it is very important for Canada to make an extraordinary effort to become the first choice for international students who are looking to study abroad. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. But you'll understand that to attract those students, yes, it can be welcoming, it can be very interesting, but to study takes winning conditions. And if we compare ourselves with other countries, and I base what I said earlier in facts, we're not in the first place. We're amongst the last places, and we're suffering setbacks if you compare what we're investing in R&D. So it's also the capacity of researchers and future researchers and students coming here. Thank you for sharing your point of view. Now, in your statement, you talked about international students, and you've also mentioned in your answer to my questions our ability to welcome. And if I refer to Quebec, you know, Mr. Johnson, that in Canada we have 2 official languages, and one of them is French. And Quebec has the ability to welcome foreign students, and those students would, will speak French, but we know that there's a high rate of rejection of student visas from students coming from Africa or other Francophone nations. And most recently, the Minister of Immigration revealed that his department has practices based on racial prejudice. So in the very department's policies and programs, and even at the operational level, I'd like to hear your opinion. What do you think of the government of Canada, showing racism? This, in Canada, we have formidable institutions. And we also have formidable English-speaking institutions and French. And, of course, this is what attracts students to come here, the opportunity to study in French or in English. It is a really beautiful richness that we have. Microphone, please. So you do not have an opinion on the fact that the government has this kind of discriminatory practice in its programs? I have nothing else to add. Thank you. I will move on to another theme, and this a question for Mr. Bernstein. CFAR coordinates a pan-Canadian strategy in artificial intelligence, and this strategy rests on 3 pillars: Edmonton, Toronto, Montreal, and we have had the opportunity to welcome Dr. Ishwa Benjoua, a worldwide leader in AI based at University of Montreal in Quebec, who's also been the chair of AI research. And my question for you is that based on this pan-Canadian strategy on AI, and it brings together certain features that might qualify as a moonshot program. Now, what do you think of this assertion, and what characteristics does it have that makes it a moonshot program? Thank you.
30 seconds.
Thank you for your question. Artificial intelligence is something that computer scientists have dreamed about since computers were first developed after the Second World War, of having machines that could in big quotation marks, actually think and actually do some things on their own, as opposed to whatever we program them to do. So they would learn by experience as opposed to by rote. What Dr. Hinton, Dr. Bengio, Dr. Sutton, and their colleagues and their students developed was really a transformative technology, transformative science that in some ways mimics the way, in a naive way, we think the brain works, which is by learning and by experience.
Dr.
To
Bernstein,
change.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I
Okay.
hope that others will pick up the questioning. I'm sorry, Monsieur Blanchet-Chancal, your time is over. We are now going to go to Mr. Cannings for 6 minutes.
Well, thank you, and I'd like to thank the witnesses here today. We always have interesting witnesses, but it seems this evening we are really blessed with a wonderful set of people to question. I would love to talk to Mr. Johnson about his ideas around education and academics. I come from that world as well. And Dr. Bernstein, I'd love to ask you questions about my friend Peter Cullis. But I'm going to turn to Mr. Klein. You talked about World War II as an example of what Canada can and has done when faced with the real demand for a moonshot kind of program. And I just wonder if you could expand on that scale of military production and economic transformation that Canada did during that time, and how did they do it, and how can it inform us today about climate change?
Thank you for your question. The military production scale in World War, it of course predates the moonshot, but I think it is an example of a moonshot-esque program. Consider this. At the outbreak of the Second World War, Canada had virtually no military production to speak of. Yet during the war, the Canadian economy and its labor force pumped out a volume of military equipment that is simply mind-blowing. During those 6 years, Canada, with a population less than a third what it is today, produced 800,000 military vehicles, more than Germany, Italy, and Japan combined, 16,000 military aircraft, ultimately building the fourth largest air force in the world at the time. Here in my province and your province, where we seem to struggle to build a single BC ferry anymore, we produced about 350 ships, again, from a base of virtually nothing. Naval architects had to be imported from the US and the UK. An entire workforce needed to be recruited and trained up. The Vancouver Shipbuilders Union local went from being a small local of 200 guys to the single largest local of men and women in the country. So to give you a sense of the scale, from a population of about 11 million Canadians at the time, over 1 million enlisted, and over 1 million were directly employed in military production. Most of this transformation occurred under the leadership of C.D. Howe, the most powerful minister in Mackenzie King's wartime government. Howe, interestingly, was an engineer turned politician, and he'd made a lot of money in the private sector before running for office. But he became seized with this task. I describe him as an engineer in a hurry. Remarkably, under Howe's leadership, the Canadian government established during those wartime years 28 crown corporations to meet the supply and munitions requirements of the war effort. Howe's department also undertook detailed economic planning, carefully coordinated supply chains in order to prioritize wartime production needs. But in response to the climate emergency, I would say we have seen nothing of this sort. If the government really saw the climate emergency as an emergency, it would, like C.D. Howe did, quickly conduct an inventory of all of our conversion needs and determine how many heat pumps and solar arrays and wind farms and electric buses are we going to need to electrify virtually everything and end our reliance on fossil fuels. And then it would establish a new generation of public corporations to ensure that those items are manufactured and deployed at the requisite scale. I think that's the lesson.
And how would you comment on what we need to do on the kind of the interplay between what the government has to do, what industry has to do, what private industry has to do, the spending that needs to be happening there, and how that interplay works out. Because, as you were saying, we're not winning right now, and we have to put in a lot more effort. And I'm just wondering what the government has to do, what role they have to take. And I think you hinted at it in your last answer, but if you can just expand on that.
Sure. Thank you. Well, look, we need both government and the private sector, and both have an important role. But in an emergency, I think this is one of the key lessons. We don't allow the private sector to determine the allocation of vital resources. Let me give you an American example from that war story. Consider this. Pearl Harbor happened in December of 1941. In February of 1942, 2 months later, the last civilian automobile rolled off the assembly line in Detroit, and for the next 4 years, their production and sale was basically illegal. Now, those factories were busy. All of those workers were employed, but now they were doing something else. They weren't doing that through the voluntary goodwill or patriotism of the big three automakers. They were doing it because they were ordered to do it. And I think we saw this in the Canadian wartime story as well. We saw over 100 prominent Canadian business leaders in the Second World War become CD Howe's $1-a-year men. So they played an instrumental role heading up some of these crown corporations, serving as what they called controllers of these supply chains. But interestingly, they actually abandoned their private sector posts to become Howe's $1-a-year men, and they understood that to achieve speed and scale in a time of emergency requires state leadership. And I think that's true again today. We are losing today. We're not spending anything close to what we need to be spending. Sir Nicholas Stern
I'm
argues
sorry
that
to interrupt, Mr. Klein. Mr. Cannings, that's your time. And Mr. Cannings,
Thank you.
You too, I too would like to recognize our witnesses, their time, their expertise, and their generosity in being here. And with that, we're going to go to the 5-minute round, and we go to Mr. Law, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. In our last meeting, we had a good discussion, and one of the points I made was that a lot of where we need to go, we just don't have the ability to get there at this current juncture. And I know our professors are saying the Herculean efforts of World War II, et cetera. But I just wondered, for yourself, Mr. Johnson, being that you're from a university environment, just think of, in the case of, say, healthcare, with our nurses and our doctors, and I hear stories all the time from people in my riding whose kids or grandkids or whoever got way over 90% in high school, they got into university, they got way over 90%. We need family doctors in rural, we need emergency room doctors in all over the place, and yet they can't get into university. They can get into university, they can't get into medical school to be a doctor. Can you give us an idea? I know you've got almost your whole life in the university environment. How is this happening?
Very simply, it happened because provincial governments decided they did not want any more medical places, and equally so with other health disciplines. In fact, when I was at McGill, we were in a position of contracting the number of places. McGill went from 160 down to 101 placements in medical school. And I think at that time we thought that we would be producing enough qualified doctors, including family practitioners and specialists, and we would depend upon immigrants for others. We had difficulty in terms of qualifications with immigrants and so on. So I think that's a case where we simply did not respond to the demand of the system and provide opportunities for more young people to have a profession in the health sciences.
Thank you. One other question I had, and I think probably we'd all agree that we need to increase funding for healthcare so it can be used at provincial level and also at the university level. The question I had is for another maybe moonshot, depending on how you look at it, is foreign credentials. and to be able to recognize, you've made some mention about international students and so forth. And what about recognizing foreign credentials and looking at a moonshot in that so that people can not be frustrated with the way things have turned out and actually get to work in the field that they studied in?
Better job on that very subject, profession by profession by profession. We do it somewhat, but not nearly enough in having appropriate, sensitive testing of the backgrounds of the individuals who wish to practice their profession in this country, and then providing appropriate experiential learning and both theoretical learning as necessary and apprenticeship, so these people are qualified to practice in their profession. I would add to that I think we should do a much greater job in interprovincial qualification of the various professions. We suffer enormously in this country from having everything focused at the provincial level and not having the opportunities for people to practice across jurisdictions. It's just another obstacle that prevents us from having both enough and appropriately qualified people for the needs of the whole country.
Okay, and one other topic, just before my time runs out, is our professors have talked about clean technology and clean energy and renewable energy, and it doesn't matter if it's, well, depending on, I support nuclear, but if you want to build a new reactor or you want to build a new hydrogen plant or whatever, the length of time it takes to get an environmental approval, an assessment, and actually build whatever it is to help the environment. Is that something we need to look at as a moonshot or a task force to find a way to reduce the assessment time for projects that?
Yes, we should do a much better job of regulation, of doing it smartly, thoroughly, but promptly, with a sense of dispatch. I write books about this. I'm doing a 6th edition of Canadian Securities Regulation, and finding that right balance of regulation that is necessary but efficient is a very key challenge.
I'll cede
Would you
my
like
time
to
to my
cede your
colleagues.
time?
Yes.
Very
all
good.
20. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Lobb. And with that, we'll go to Ms. Bradford for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. And thank you to all three fascinating witnesses and the interesting perspectives that you bring to this discussion tonight. I greatly appreciate it. Mr. Johnson, I noticed from your opening comments, I would argue that you're still a university president at heart. I think you've done many things since, but I think that's still your DNA. So it's wonderful to have your perspective here. And we still really miss you in the Waterloo region. So we were sad to see you leave the presidency of U of W, but we were taking one for Team Canada, and you were an amazing Governor General. So thank you for your service. And we are reminded of you and your lovely wife, Sharon, every time we drive by the university and see the David Johnson Research and Innovation Park, which I know you weren't happy about, but it's still a nice daily reminder when we go by there. So we are here to study ambitious research goals that we hope will solve some of Canada and the world's biggest social and environmental challenges. And I know in your opening address, you mentioned about curiosity and the importance of curiosity. So what role does curiosity-driven research play in achieving these ambitious goals?
Well, I think it's the beginning and the middle ground and the end. Curiosity fuels everything, along with the courage to think independently. But I should say about teaching, in my installation address as Gigi, it was entitled A Smart and Caring Nation, A Call to Service. And I said, if you remember only 3 words of what I say today, they are cherish our teachers, because apart from our family, they have the most important influences on us. And I said, if we had 3 hours together in the Senate chamber, I'd tell you 100 stories of teachers, coaches, mentors that have made an influence in my life for the better. And that's why I so much stress the business of education as the heart of everything, including in this world when data is available at the fingertips, curiosity and being able to ask the penetrating kind of questions. And that actually is the role of the teacher today, not to be the fountain of all knowledge, but to provide the methods of inquiry, etc. And this is where Canada, I think, has very considerable advantages. We do have a good public education system. It can be better, but we want to make it better. And instilling curiosity and learning how to learn is pretty fundamental. Our number 5 daughter did her doctorate in educational psychology. She has a learning disability, and she works now as a senior research scientist for a company spun off by her Harvard professor who supervised her thesis on how the mind learns and combining that with the digital revolution. And it's wonderful to see how we can develop customized curricula that deal with the specific needs of a specific child, one with a disability and the other one who's vitally enriched. For me, that's a wonderful new opportunity opening. But the simple process to that kind of curiosity that is at our fingertips that I've been speaking about tonight is putting this on an international scale. And we gain so much by developing those collaborative networks around the world.
Thank you. I think everyone of us in the room can remember one special teacher that influenced us. It could be a grade school level or whatever, but I think each one of us, if you think back, there's that one special teacher that made a real difference. So Canada doesn't have a specific moonshot titled program. However, much of the funding and policy initiatives align with characteristics of a moonshot program. What, in your opinion, are the areas that Canada is doing work related to moonshot type research?
Well, you know, I'd begin with the Canadian Institute for Advanced Research, which Alan served with such distinction for 10 years, and I had the enormous privilege of being chair of that in earlier days. That was a remarkable vision of Fraser Mustard, mainly with help from people like John Evans, to identify some of those areas that were areas of great need, dependent upon interdisciplinary approaches and unusual approaches, not the conventional approaches, but reached out beyond Canada's borders to bring the best in the world to beyond the advisory committees and so on, and do some of the work and be part of the collaboration. So if I were to list the things that where Canada has the greatest opportunity, I'd begin by asking Alan, how did you develop your priorities for the programs that you struck over the 10 years that you were there, Alan, and where are you today and what you see in the future? Artificial intelligence is a very good example because when Jeff Hinton was working in this area 25 years ago, it was not funded by the granting agencies because it was considered too wild. Mimicking the human brain, I mean, how on earth can you do that? But thanks to the Canadian Institute for Advanced Research, which early on funded him, because it saw promise in this very unconventional research, it's become extremely important worldwide. And guess what? As was just indicated, Canada's one of the 2 or 3 great leaders in that sphere.
Yellow card at us. It's bad in soccer and it's bad for us too.
Ms. Bradford, sorry, your time is over, but I just want to know if you wanted to ask perhaps Dr. Bernstein if he wanted to table what...
Yes, that would be excellent, Dr. Bernstein. If you could answer the question that Mr. Johnson referred to in writing, that would be most helpful for our committee. Thank you.
I'll be happy to do that.
Thank you to you both for that, all 3 of you. And with that, we're going to go to Monsieur Blanchet-Shankar for 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. And a question for Mr. Klein. I listened to your opening statement and I found it very interesting, especially the aspect where you say there's not much progress given the climate emergency and that the government's programs are not mandatory. And I have read your book and I see your comparison with the war effort, our grandparents, and their role in World War II. In your opinion, what kind of war effort should be we carrying out today to fight against climate change, and how can we be inspired by ambitious projects, moonshot projects, to do so? Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Well, I would walk you through those 6 markers that I gave you. So spend what it takes to win, as I was starting to get at with the other question. We're not there yet. Sir Nicholas Stern says we should be spending about 2% of GDP to tackle the climate emergency. In the Canadian context, that would be about $56 billion a year. If you were to tally up our spending now on climate infrastructure and climate action, generously, it clocks in at about $12 billion a year. So we're not a little off. We're off by a 4 to 5-fold order of magnitude. create new institutions to get the job done. When I mentioned how C.D. Howe created these 28 crown corporations. By the way, C.D. Howe was no lefty. I mean, he was on the right wing of Mackenzie King's cabinet. And so part of what I try to do is apply the same logic by which this fellow says, when do we actually need a crown enterprise to intervene in order to drive change? And then let's map that same logic onto the present. And I can give you a list, a 3-page list of what I think those crown enterprises might be. The point about mandatory measures is really important. And the fact that we're still stuck trying to incentivize our way to victory. If you look, I mentioned carbon pricing, but in recent budgets, so much of what we're trying to drive now in the way of clean technology is a 50% corporate income tax cut. The most recent financial statement, the fall financial statement, has now offered up a further tax credit for capital. All of these will have some impact. I'm not saying they're not valuable.
Mr. Klein, I have to interrupt you. Quick question. Can you tell us of any countries that we could be inspired by that have put this kind of policy in place?
Time. Could you ask for it to be tabled?
Could I get an answer in writing? Thank you.
And with that, we will go for 2.5 minutes to Mr. Cannings, please.
Well, thank you. And I was actually planning to ask Mr. Klein that very question in so many words. This is an international crisis we're facing with the climate crisis. Are there other countries out there that are doing inspirational things? If Canada did move ahead, we can only hope with a real moonshot program. Would that be inspirational to other countries? How do we get the whole world to do this? Because it's just such a big problem that the whole globe is facing. But are there advantages Canada can gain from taking these steps right now in the global context, in our international trade, et cetera, and in our economy?
Well, thank you for sparing me the homework. I don't see another national country hitting all of these 6 markers, but there are certainly other countries that are doing better than us. If you were to look at Canada within the G7 context, our success in lowering emissions is the worst among the G7 countries. And interestingly, the countries that do best, the UK in particular and Germany, this has happened under all political stripes, where there's more of this cross-spectrum commitment. I think there are some municipal governments that are hitting the markers. Here in my city, let me give you an example of what I mean by mandatory measures. I'm in Vancouver. As of this year in Vancouver, no new buildings are allowed to use fossil fuels for space and water heating. This is 10 years sooner than the provincial target or other targets that we've seen across the country. That's driving change. That's driving investments in a way that we are not seeing elsewhere, and I think there's a model there.
Sorry, I was just caught off guard
40
here.
seconds.
40 seconds. Okay. So just getting back to that last point about Vancouver and no more new natural gas and new buildings. That is something that those are the kind of things that we need to do. That's the mandatory regulations that you're talking about, some of them anyways?
That would be an example of marker 3 of moving to mandatory measures, yeah.
Okay, well, I'll leave things there then. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Cannings. I'd like to thank all our witnesses. When you have such terrific testimony, it's hard when the discussion comes to an end. I think everyone was very interested to hear from you. It was wide-ranging, but we thank you for your time and your expertise. We hope it's been a good experience and that you will want to come back and join us again. And with that, dear colleagues, we're going to suspend because then we will go into camera. Suspended.